Nobody heard anything from Sarah. She just completely vanished, and that's when the alarm bells really started ringing.
I couldn't sleep, I couldn't eat, because all I was thinking about was, where is my sister? What's happened to my sister? Is she okay?
Sarah hadn't been seen for a number of days, and this was investigated as a high-risk missing person.
I knew then that it was very serious and Sarah was either hurt or dead.
I received a phone call from the officers on the ground to say that they had located a body.
Not somewhere that people would have accidentally stumbled across this body. It was designed to be well hidden. They were the actions of somebody who knew exactly what they were doing.
On the banks of the River Erewash in Derbyshire lies the small town of Ilkeston.
Ilkeston's a mining community. Everyone knows everyone. So when you speak to people on the street, they are just perfectly friendly and they're quite happy to help.
Ilkeston has a very strong sense of belonging, and generation after generation of families stay in the area.
You've got nice woodland areas where you can go and have a walk. You can got like a hilltop thing where you can sit and you can look out over the fields, which is quite a nice view.
And the countryside's really accessible. In fact, like, I can just walk out my flat, go a few minutes, and I can be walking down the canal. It's a beautiful, beautiful area.
You go in a cafe, even if you don't know people in there, within seconds, you know, it's like you've known each other for years. You know, it's a lovely place.
And everybody helps one another, especially in times of need. I've always said there is nowhere else that I've ever been where the community spirit is like it is here.
Ilkeston is the town where 31-year-old Sarah Henshaw chose to raise her 2 children.
Sarah was a much-loved family member and friend within the community.
She was a full-time care assistant, going around the community, helping, looking after old people, yeah.
Everybody knew Sarah. She always helped people out whenever she had the chance, like helping neighbours in with their shopping. She always helped everybody out.
So when nobody has seen Sarah for a few days, her family start to feel uneasy.
I'd not seen her around. I normally see her go past in my car, or she would come to mine. I'd not seen her. I'd not heard from her.
My mum would ring me up to say, keep an eye out for Sarah. She'd rang around, she said she'd rang around everybody she could possibly think of who knew Sarah and where she would be. Nobody had no idea where Sarah was. And then I said, Mum, do you think it's serious? And she said, no, I think she's just gone away for a couple of days. But I said, Mum, Sarah wouldn't even do that. She wouldn't go without the girls.
Police were made aware that Sarah hadn't been seen for a number of days, and that was on Friday, the 23rd of June. And this was investigated as a high-risk missing person, and that was as a result of speaking to family members and friends and coming to the conclusion that this was completely out of character for Sarah to be incommunicado with people very close to her.
When Sarah's family realise that she has not taken her car, their fears escalate.
3 things she never, ever, ever goes out the house with ever: a kid, a phone and a car. She won't walk down the street only if her car's broke down or if it's got problems, or she'll be in a car. Anywhere she goes, she'll be in a car.
She'd been assaulted by somebody unknown to her a few years before which caused her to drive everywhere in her car. She never went anywhere on foot, very rarely.
I said to my mum, "Mum, something's not right here. It's not normal for Sarah to go without a car, to leave the keys, to leave the kids." I knew then that it was very serious and Sarah was either hurt or dead.
Police need to look into Sarah's life to see if anything can explain her disappearance.
It was a bit hectic and crazy growing up as a big family because there was 6 of us as siblings in a little house. Sarah always looked out for me. Sarah wanted me to grow up and be a young woman with respect. Sarah, that's one thing Sarah always said to me, is you need self-respect. And she always taught me to say my please and thank yous all the time, reminded me.
Sarah was the main one of the family and they all looked up to her. And if the siblings needed anything, she'd be there straight away. If anyone upset members of her family, she'd tell them straight. She was a joker as well, like bubbly and joking. You don't know what to expect from her.
Laughing. It was always laughing. Always. Or she, you know, just the way she was. She was so caring, always there for everybody. And I just love laughing with her. She was just so funny, always telling jokes.
But yeah, she was just mad. Good mad, like, not bad mad, but yeah. We just was a bit nutty together, to be honest. She was good to me and I was good to her.
Sarah loved to have independence. That's all she did. She was a very independent, strong woman, and everybody knew her for that. She didn't like to be seen struggling. She didn't like to ask for help. She did it all by herself.
There was nothing significant that stood out regarding Sarah. Her main priority, quite obviously, were her 2 girls and her dog, and creating a home life that was happy and fun. She was clearly well-loved, friendly, vivacious young woman who had the whole of her life in front of her.
When we first found out Sarah was missing, family members were contacting all of her friends, anybody who could link to Sarah, who could have seen her, and nobody had. We all was just constantly ringing her phone, hoping she'd turn it on for 5 minutes and maybe reply to one of us, but calls were going to answer phone, messages were going, not sending. During the days Sarah was missing and the police were aware of it all and the investigation was ongoing, I couldn't sleep, I couldn't eat, because all I was thinking about was, where is my sister? What's happened to my sister? Is she okay?
As police inquiries continue, concern for Sarah's welfare grows.
What we noted was that Sarah was constantly messaging people, friends, family. So the fact that there was no phone usage was a huge red flag to the police. Nobody heard anything from Sarah. She just completely vanished. And that's when the alarm bells really started ringing. She was not caught on CCTV anywhere. CCTV covers a huge amount of space now. Ring doorbell footage. Her car was where it was, so how had she disappeared without being caught on any of those items of media?
There were real concerns for Sarah's safety. My main aim and focus was to find Sarah Henshaw. Police forced entry into her home address in an effort to find her. Clearly Sarah wasn't there, but there were signs in the kitchen that there possibly had been a clean-up. There was mop and bucket and bleach.
So I ran up to her house and there was a police officer there and I went, "Is Sarah there?" And he went, no, she's not in the house. And I said, well, can I go in and check? He goes, we've already checked, she's not there. I goes, something's happened to it, don't feel right. I says, she's either hurt somewhere or she's lying somewhere really bad. I says, I've got this feeling.
As search teams scour Sarah's house, they make another alarming discovery.
Sarah always wore a necklace with an elephant charm on it.
It was of great sentimental value to her, and we found it broken in different parts of the house. That raised the concerns for Sarah's well-being and whether we would actually find her alive.
In Ilkeston, Derbyshire, police have deemed 31-year-old Sarah Henshaw a high-risk missing person. In Sarah's home, search teams have found fragments of her broken necklace, along with signs of a clean-up.
So there were 23 exhibits seized from Sarah's home address, including mobile phones, laptops, clothing, but also some blue tarpaulin that we took possession of.
Tracing Sarah's last known movements, detectives make an unsettling discovery. The last time she was caught on CCTV was a full 3 days previously.
It became apparent that her last known sighting, last proof of life, was Tuesday the 20th of June, when she was seen on CCTV entering a local shop.
At 6:30, she purchased some groceries. She was fit, she was well, she didn't present us with any concerns when she was in the store.
Police released these images of Sarah on social media in an appeal to the public for information.
Then it had gone on to like Derbyshire Live, and then obviously people sharing it was just going more and more everywhere, you know, around the community.
I remember seeing the missing persons alert, and at that point it started to become clear that the police were getting concerned.
It became apparent during that investigation phase that there were witnesses. A neighbour heard a commotion coming from the property on the evening of the 20th of June.
At around 10 p.m, an argument can be heard coming from Sarah's bedroom, followed by a banging noise and then silence.
So my suspicions were raised, and I was really concerned about Sarah's safety. And this was not just a missing persons inquiry, this was a murder investigation. And that was a result of witnesses who had heard chilling screams coming from Sarah's bedroom on that evening. This then became a no-body murder investigation.
When police speak to Sarah's neighbour Demi, she reveals she also heard noises from Sarah's house on the night of June 20th.
Like a banging on a radiator. It was doo doo doo, and it was like, it was a weird sound, so it was either coming from her bedroom or the stairs, the landing. I'd messaged her and put, is everything okay? And as I hold the phone, as soon as it went to her phone, it had been read and replied saying, yes, everything okay? And I just texted back and put, okay, that's fine. I thought I could hear something.
A reply was sent from Sarah's phone to say that everything was okay, it was just the dog having a fit. The dog had been known to have fits. That was a condition that their dog had suffered with.
And I just thought it was the dog, so with the reply that I got off Sarah saying, yes, everything's okay, I've gone back to sleep.
Then in the early hours, Demi is again disturbed.
I heard something else, so I've looked out of my window and Darren was standing at his van, but he had both of the back doors open. Then he shut the doors and walked in, and then that was it.
As Sarah's former partner, Darren Hall is still a regular visitor, so Demi thinks little more of it until the following morning.
Sarah's friend knocked on Sarah's house, no answer. And she said, oh, have you seen Sarah? And I says, no, I haven't seen her since the night before. Messaged Darren, and I asked him, have you seen Sarah? And he said, the reply that I got is, no, I don't know where she's gone. She's went out early hours. And I said, all right, so do you know where she is? She hasn't taken a car. And he said, no, don't know anything. I'll try and let you know later.
Later that day, Darren tells Demi that he's worried about Sarah and that some of her belongings are missing.
He said, have you been in all day? I said, I have. And he said, do you know if anybody's been in the house? And I said, no. And he said, somebody's been in the house and opened her drawers, taken clothes out, but then she had like a butterfly bag. She loved butterflies, and put, you know, clothes inside this bag, gone out the house and taken it. And I said, no, I've not seen anybody.
As police continued to trace Sarah's movements in the hours before she was last caught on CCTV, it becomes apparent that she had spent much of the previous day with a friend.
So Sarah, on that Tuesday, had been out with her best friend all day and had come back in the evening, went to the shop, picked up some items for tea, went back to find that Darren had let himself in with a key that he still had. We now know that Sarah wasn't happy about it and had asked him to return it. We know that the atmosphere was frosty, that Sarah didn't want him there.
There'd been a build-up throughout the day. Sarah was saying to him in no uncertain terms that she didn't want him in her life anymore. She didn't want him at the house. She wanted him to leave his key. We know that throughout that evening that Darren was refusing to go. He wasn't accepting, but she didn't want him to be there.
Sarah's best friend said that her and Darren had an argument at the dinner table. It was very chaotic. Darren upsetting Sarah, and obviously Sarah saying, please just get out of my house, I need some time to myself. And she said she knew Sarah was uncomfortable in her own house because Darren was there and wouldn't leave.
We know from CCTV inquiries on Sarah Street that she left her home address to take a friend home. Sarah dropped a friend off and returned back to her home address a couple of minutes later. So Sarah would have been back at her home address just before 10 p.m, 20th of June.
Police inquiries reveal that Darren was still at the house when Sarah returned.
At 22:02 hours, we know that there's a message exchange between Sarah and her best friend. And then Sarah sends a final message from her phone at 10:09, which a friend responds to at 10:37. And that's the message that Sarah would have replied back to. A friend is asking if she's okay. But after that message, there's no contact from Sarah.
It appears that Darren Hall may have been the last person to see Sarah Henshaw alive.
No other persons were coming into the frame as to being responsible for her disappearance other than her ex-partner, who was in the house at that time.
At this point, I'm placing you under arrest for murder. You don't have to say anything, but it may harm you by later on in court, and anything you do say might be giving evidence. The reason that you've been arrested, the necessity is so we can do a prompt and effective investigation, and so we don't have any loss of evidence, OK? It's on suspicion of murder at the moment.
Mum of two, Sarah Henshaw, is missing, presumed dead. Her ex-partner, Darren Hall, is believed to be the last person to have seen her alive, and despite police finding no body, he has been arrested on suspicion of her murder.
Sarah's always happy, no matter what, even if things were on her mind, she always stayed happy. She managed to make everybody laugh. Even on our bad days, we'd laugh. We could not stop laughing.
Was he surprised? Go on then.
Sarah would do anything for her friends. a very genuine, kind, loving person, and that's not something what can be put on. That is who Sarah was.
She never went out. She preferred staying in and having cuddles and playing pranks on each other. Her home was her safe space.
Police interviewed Darren. They took his phone from him at that point. He maintained in his interview that they'd had an argument and that Sarah had left him.
Darren maintained that he was not responsible for Sarah going missing, that he didn't know where she was, that she had done this before, that she had gone off and left the family home.
Detectives questioned Darren as to why he was in the driveway of Sarah's house in the early hours of the morning on the night they believe she was killed.
Darren was giving a very convoluted story about the events of that night and the reasons why he left the home in the early hours, citing that the dog had a fit and messed on a duvet, and he was having to leave the address in the early hours to dispose of this duvet. And I was acutely aware of how hot it was that June and how desperately I wanted to find Sarah for her family. So we were imploring Darren to tell us where she was. Just tell us where she was. And he was quite callous. At one point said to us that it was our job to find her.
Police start to find inconsistencies in Darren's account of that night.
We know Sarah didn't leave the home address, as he stated, due to the CCTV trawls that we were doing. And also it would have been very out of character to walk out of her home address, which is something she never did, particularly in the middle of the night.
Convinced that Darren knows details of Sarah's whereabouts, police fast-track analysis of the phone they seized on his arrest.
So we know Darren Hall's mobile phone was connected to Sarah's home address in the early hours of the 21st of June and disconnected from her home address at 10 to 2 approximately, and then connected up with his Ford Transit van that was parked outside. So following on from that, we then plotted his route using GPS data, ANPR, CCTV, where he had gone in the early hours. We know his route, leaving Ilkeston, joining the M1 at junction 29, and we know that his vehicle became stationary at a lay-by on the A617.
And we know that it was in that lay-by for a total of 9 minutes. And we can say that because Darren Hall's phone was tracked on the same satellite which covered the lay-by for the 9 minutes he was there.
We also know during that time that the torchlight on his phone was turned on and off at intervals.
So every time you turn it on and off, it stamps it, leaves a date and a time as to each activation. We was also able to look at the apps that he'd viewed, the downloads on his mobile phone. The health app was very important because it showed that he was taking hundreds of steps in the early hours of the 21st, which is out of character. The normal activity for Darren between midnight and 6 in the morning is that there's no activity at all. Yet on this particular morning, he's done 266 steps. We were confident that Darren was in the lay-by, so we sent a specialist uniformed task force, a search team down to that lay-by.
And it was some 10 minutes later that I received a phone call from the officers on the ground to say that they had located a body some 10 metres from the lay-by.
The lay-by was heavily overgrown, dense, wooded area. You wouldn't have been able to see the body unless you actually walked into the woods. We only found the body through the location data on Darren's mobile phone.
Upon searching the deposition area, we found small snags of blue tarpaulin on the bramble bushes that were seized and found to match the blue tarpaulin within Sarah's home address. It was quite quickly became apparent that this was the body of Sarah Henshaw.
The Monday they came and told me that they found her. I still sat there thinking she's going to come back.
The first thing I said after my mum said that she was dead was, where is she? Where was she found? And my mum said that he had just dumped her in a lay-by. Sorry. Oh, damn. I'm gonna do it, I just gotta, hang on, sorry, it's because this is the first time I've ever spoken about it. All I wanted was my big sister. I just wanted my big sister to come back and say, I'm okay now, it's fine, stop stressing. And then to get told a week later of the news that I'm never going to get to see her again broke me.
Police tell Darren Hall they have found Sarah's body.
We located Sarah's body just after midnight on Monday, the 26th of June, and the next interview we told him that we had found her body and where. From that point on, he remained silent.
He completely changed. He closed down, wouldn't answer any further questions, wouldn't make eye contact, wouldn't engage with the officers at all, just sat there in silence.
8 days after Sarah Henshaw's death, Darren Hall is charged with her murder.
He maintained that he had no idea where Sarah was or what had happened to her. And when he was confronted with the evidence after they'd found her body, that's when he had no answers.
With so many questions left unanswered, Sarah's mum seeks guidance from a medium.
And she was sending messages that she kept doing this, he said. Kept doing that round her neck. And that she was wrapped in something. She passed a message on to me saying, you deal with the court, get justice.
Then as the court date approaches, Darren Hall breaks his silence.
Darren Hall admitted that he had disposed of Sarah's body. Darren's defence was that Sarah had fallen down the stairs and he had panicked.
What Darren didn't admit is that he was the one who'd killed Sarah.
The body of Sarah Henshaw has been found near a lay-by in Derbyshire. Her ex-partner, Darren Hall, has admitted to concealing her body, but denies her murder.
He just treated her like a bag of rubbish. No, you wouldn't even treat an animal like that. He didn't love her if he was going to do that.
And there were probably around a dozen friends and family members in the court, and they were deeply distressed.
I was nervy, but I sat there and I was so strong. And all my family were there and they were strong.
The courtroom was charged with energy. When Darren was led into the dock,
I just sat looking at him, thought, you ain't getting the better of me. I'm more stronger than you, mate. And I sat there looking at him.
But Darren Hall cuts a forlorn figure in the dock.
He looked utterly petrified. I didn't know really whether he'd be able to give evidence. He looked that nervous and that distressed.
and it was apparent, looking at Darren, he appeared to be putting on some act to me of a dishevelled, nervous wreck of a man who was being wrongly convicted.
You've got to be quite careful in that situation, because you don't want the jury to feel sympathy for somebody. You want to demonstrate what a cold, calculating person he had been.
The defence lay out their case that Sarah had fallen down the stairs in a fatal accident.
He said it happened in a split second. He said he looked at the bottom of the stairs and she was dead. He panicked, didn't want anyone to find out about it and accuse him of murder.
He actually describes Sarah as the one who was pushing him across the landing. If your loved one had fallen down the stairs, the first thing what he'd do is call for an ambulance, and if you can save that person's life, you would do everything in your powers to do that. But Darren didn't do that. If we go back to Darren's interviews, he never mentioned that Sarah had fallen down the stairs. His story is that they'd had an argument and she'd gone to stay at a friend's house. If there was any other innocent explanation, then you would tell the police what had happened. But Darren didn't do that because he couldn't, because there wasn't an innocent explanation for what he'd done. He very coldly murdered her.
But there is a gaping hole in the prosecution's case.
What we didn't have was an eyewitness as to what actually took place. We had people who heard things. One witness heard a scream, another heard banging.
The prosecution offer up a theory as to Darren's motive for killing Sarah.
Sarah was going to expose Darren on social media about an affair that she believed that he had had. Those messages would have been present on Sarah's phone, so he needed to get rid of that phone because it gives a motive for him to kill her.
Police believe that Darren Hall disposed of Sarah's phone the day after he left her body in the lay-by.
On his return to Ilkeston, we know he pulled into a lake. He stops and his phone disconnects from his van for 30 seconds. He then gets back in his van and continues home. My thoughts are, why, on your way home, would you stop at a lake for just 30 seconds? My belief was that this is where he threw Sarah's phone. That lake was searched tirelessly by dive officers, but Sarah's phone was never found.
The prosecution revealed disturbing details of Darren and Sarah's relationship.
So Darren and Sarah had been together for approximately 12, 13 years, a very volatile on-off relationship.
If Sarah was going through a bad time with anything, he had no sympathy. He didn't show that, and he didn't show no love, none whatsoever.
It was little petty arguments at first, but the voices would get louder and louder, and then it wouldn't be a petty argument anymore. It would be over the silliest thing. Maybe she's nipped to the shop and she's been longer than what she thought she'd be, and then it'd be questions after questions. And she said, "I feel like I'm stepping on eggshells around you, Darren." And she had bruises on her arms and on her face. And I said, "Sarah, how did you get them?" And she said, "Oh, I fell down the stairs." But I knew that straight away she can't just get marks and a black eye from falling down the stairs. And later on, my mum had told me it was from Darren.
He hurt her when she was pregnant. He pushed her. And obviously Sarah said, "Don't say it, Mum." I warned her to ring someone then, but she wouldn't. She just said, "I love him, Mum, and I want to be with him." And I says, "If that's what you want, I can't stop you."
But this evidence is entirely circumstantial.
We're aware there were incidents of domestic abuse, however, none of which unfortunately being reported to the police.
And Darren is visibly distraught, claiming that he adored Sarah.
And his case was that their relationship was brilliant at the beginning. It had its difficulties, but he really wanted to make it work.
The analysis of both Darren and Sarah's phone data that is laid out for the jury reveals some disturbing evidence.
Messages were sent in response to her friends questioning her about is she okay because of the lack of contact.
The texts from Sarah Henshaw's phone were then matched, of course, time-wise with when Darren Hall dumped her body in the lay-by.
We now know that that would be Darren Hall re-messaging those friends back, purporting to be Sarah. We believe at that time that Sarah was dead.
And I think most upsettingly, but crucially, he had been sending a number of messages to Sarah's phone, effectively saying, "Where are you? I miss you. Please come home."
The fact that he was sending messages from his phone to Sarah's phone, it was a very considered and convoluted way of disguising the fact that he had killed her.
And there is further incriminating evidence obtained from Darren Hall's phone when police look at searches he has made in the days following Sarah's death.
Darren makes 2 Google searches. The first one looking into police procedures for missing persons, and the second one is can deleted messages be recovered from an iPhone. We know that Darren searches how to change over child tax benefit. It just shows something very sinister, don't it?
Phone data reveals that despite his story to neighbour Demi, it was not Sarah that had taken a bag of her belongings, but Darren Hall himself.
I think the most shocking part of the trial was the fact that he'd gone back to the family home and snuck in to pack this bag to then further perpetuate the lie that Sarah had left her family. To think about that, to think about doing that, showed a man who knew exactly what he was doing and was doing everything in his power to avoid being caught.
He removed a number of items of clothing and packed them in a butterfly duffel bag that belonged to Sarah. We then know that Darren left Sarah's after 10 minutes, and from his phone location data we know that he went directly to Ilkeston Skip. He drives around to where the clothing bank is, parks up, and he removes 2 black bags from his van and disposes of them into the clothing bank.
And it became apparent that Darren had got rid of evidence that may have implicated him in the disappearance of Sarah.
Unfortunately, by the time the police discovered the CCTV of that, the recycling bin had been emptied, and so we were never able to show what had been disposed of.
However, we continued on with his movements of that day. Later that day, he'd also visited a recycling centre in Nottingham with his work colleague. He'd distracted his work colleague to empty the back of the van whilst he went to the side of the van and took out 2 white plastic bags. That skip was seized, and specialist search teams conducted a meticulous search through the items of that skip.
There was a box with Darren's address on it, which enabled us to link that bag to Darren. And then underneath that box, Sarah's dressing gown cord and the slippers.
And that enabled us to put forward the case theory that actually he had strangled her using the dressing gown cord. The question we put before the jury was, why would he get rid of that dressing gown? What was so significant about it that he felt the need to dispose of it? And he hadn't done this on just one day. He'd done this over the course of 2 or 3 days. And that was crucial because it showed that this wasn't a man who was panicking. Actually, it showed that he was thinking about his actions and very carefully disposing of items in different, separate locations in an effort to thwart the police investigation.
But Sarah's post-mortem does not corroborate the theory that she was strangled.
Sarah's body, it had begun to decompose. So the normal types of injuries that we look for and what we thought was a strangulation case would be bruising around the neck. And we couldn't see that because the skin was so discoloured.
Darren maintains that Sarah's death was as a result of her falling downstairs.
There were no bony injuries, so no bruises or abrasions on parts of the body that, if you'd fallen down the stairs, that's where you would expect there to be injuries. We were able to show that, or the lack of injury showed that that was not consistent with his account. Put that together with the screams that were heard, and we said that ultimately he had murdered her.
But the defence are quick to point out that Sarah's cause of death is unknown.
The two doctors that I saw give evidence both said we can't conclude definitively how this person died because of the state of decomposition.
With all the evidence now presented, it is a nervous wait for the jury's decision.
There was the concern that Darren Hall was going to wriggle out of this and the jury would accept his explanation.
There's always an element of risk with any trial, particularly in this case when we couldn't definitively say how Sarah had died.
Having deliberated for just 3 hours, the jury returns.
There's a lot of trepidation in anticipation for what that verdict is going to be. The stress is palpable, and you could hear a pin drop when the verdict is heard. Guilty. The verdict was unanimous decision of guilty for murder.
We all screamed yes so loud, and we all looked at Darren, and Darren's face just went down and he just did that.
My body just drained, or the drain feeling. And I went up to the prosecution barrister and gave her a hug and said thank you.
The sentence was life. The minimum term was 17 years. Now that means that Darren Hall will have to serve at least 17 years before he's considered eligible for parole.
Darren Hall is manipulative, deceiving, and a violent individual. So as a result of his continued lies and deceitful way in which he disposed of Sarah's body, he robbed her family of having the opportunity to say goodbye to her.
None of us was able to see Sarah, as they said, because of the heat and the amount of time she was out in the lay-by for, her body had decomposed in some areas.
There's a part of me what's gone, so my heart, a part of my heart's ripped out.
We have got the life sentence. We're never going to sit and have a cup of tea with Sarah ever again. I'm never going to get to see my big sister ever again.